Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the
Whoa,
project.
Where do you think you are?
Should we rewind that?
No.
Yeah, let's welcome back.
Project Chilluminati. That's a reality show where we find the fourth host of Chilluminati.
And we never find anybody because we need to stretch it for 10 seasons.
Right. Well, yeah. I mean, that's the whole point.
Yeah, it's
Right,
like
exactly.
the Curse of Oak Island's TV show.
Never seen it. Never even heard of it. Don't even know what that is.
It's like all 26 seasons of the search for Bigfoot.
Yeah.
You figured they would find him one of those
You'd
seasons.
see it in the news, right? Like
Bigfoot is a stealth. Like he's stealthy. Like he is a stealthy dude.
By the way, if you want
he's
to
not.
just putting this out there, if you're like me and you love skepticism, guess what did I just say?
It's a hard day for everybody today, apparently.
Project Skepticism.
All Gas No Brakes has an amazing video where he goes out to hunt Bigfoot with a bunch of Bigfoot hunters, and it is hilarious.
Does he shoot one? Does he bag himself one?
Does he bag himself
It
one?
is them. You know what? I'm just gonna say, go watch the video. It's great. That dude.
What is it called again? Say that again.
It's this guy who like All Gas No Brakes is the name of the YouTube channel.
All right. That
And
sounds great. I want to see it.
It's kind of like, imagine like a young kid, but doing the things Daily Show correspondents do, where they like go and interview people at events. And so he goes to like, drug raves, and he goes to like Trump rallies, and he goes to like,
great.
can't
like
wait to
UFO
watch this.
conventions,
Yeah, that sounds great.
and the porn star conventions. And he just will like ask people questions. And it is just perfect. Just perfect stuff.
You reminded me of something, and I'm going to say it real quick. I don't want to make promises that won't necessarily happen. However, I did a podcast for my friend Dan Giesling a few weeks back. And at the end of the podcast, we were talking about Chilluminati basically the whole time. And he said he was going to put me in touch with somebody who right now is wrapping up a show about hunting Bigfoot. And then after he's done with that I would love to have him on as like an interview the guy for like an episode.
Like a post?
So I'm not saying
Like
it's
a post?
definitely going to happen, but it's in there. It's out there. It might happen.
Debrief the Foot Hunter.
Debrief the Foot Hunter. I love it. Welcome, by the way, everybody, to Chilluminati Podcast, episode 79. As always, I'm one of your hosts, Mike Martin, joined by my two co-hosts, Jesse Cox and Alex Fasciane.
Hi.
Hi, man. I know I usually just hawk it to you for Patreon, and I normally would, but I would like to take it just for a moment and
Go
just
for
say
it.
a big, huge thank you. So we actually updated our $50 tier, our biggest tier, and what you get now with that tier on top of everything else.
That's our biggest tier. There isn't the Jesse Cox $10,000
the
I'll
biggest
believe
feasible tier. There is a $10,000 tier.
All right.
Surprisingly, nobody has taken it up
How many slots
yet.
are there?
For 10,000, as many as people want.
I'll
going
believe
fast,
twice.
folks.
Yeah.
Yeah, they go quick. Yeah, listen, 1, 2,
you
maybe
pay
3.
us $10,000 for that 1 month, I'll believe.
It's great.
He'll
It's
be like,
it's really,
you don't
really
say.
good.
See, tell me more.
No, how about for $10,000?
What else
you
is
get-
true?
You get to choose what Jesse believes for a month. For 10
my
grand,
God,
you can
don't
choose
do that
what
to
he
me.
believes in.
I'll be like, let me tell you about the flat earth. I
a month
myself
of-
will hate myself. Yeah, don't do that. Don't do that to me.
Sounds
I'm gonna
amazing.
make him do 2 hours on the. I'll pay it just to make him do 2 hours on the turtle that we all are on the back of.
In the back of his face.
The
Yeah,
turtle
dude, I
that's
love it.
on
I
the
love it.
elephants in the yeah. Well, the elephants that are on the turtle that are on the Discworld. Yeah, of course.
Yeah, perfect.
Well,
Yeah.
the $50 tier, the one that other people are actually part of, now gets on top of the ad-free episodes and minisodes and digital posters and stuff. Every t-shirt that we release on the Yeti, you get. So whenever
Damn.
we release a t-shirt on there, you're going to get a code sent to you on Patreon.
You get.
That'll get you, hook you up with the t-shirt. This month, you're getting the Chupacabra t-shirt, the one that just launched. Everybody at the $50 tier gets that. And a bunch of people jumped up there. So huge thank you for the support on Patreon.
No more logging in only to find that it's already gone.
Yep.
Rest easy, patrons.
Jesse, Alex, take it from here, man. If there's more you'd like to add, this is
What
your
else? I mean,
home
what
turf.
Easy, patrons.
I mean, what else is there to say besides head
Not
on
much.
down to patreon.com/Chilluminati pod, where all your dreams can literally come true.
Every time.
Most you can pay is $50, and if you do, everything you've ever wanted regarding the Chilluminati podcast will come true.
It's true.
Yeah.
And if you pay $10,000, you make Jesse's dreams come
Let me
true
be
for
real.
a month.
Let me be real. This is your moment, like weird Saudi prince who wants to have your 15 minutes in the
of
sun.
control.
I will give you, if you, in addition to Jesse believing whatever you say for 1 month, I will give you 2 minutes of airtime on every episode for that whole month.
What?
That's a fair deal. That's
2
a fair
minutes
deal.
of whatever you want to say.
You could be literally at the beginning of this episode where we're going to talk about one of the most horrific things that's ever occurred here on planet Earth. So are we ready for the episode, boys? Is that it for our shilling?
No.
Listen, I don't
like
usually
that.
reach out to one person, but if that one person is real,
You will do it every single time.
yeah, come on down.
We'll be friends for a month.
All right.
No, I don't want to invite that
Ruin
danger.
my day, man.
Never mind. That's no problem. I'm ready to ruin everybody's mood. We've been talking about it for a long time. Boys, it's finally time to start part 1 of however many parts this is of MK Ultra.
Well, how many parts do you really think it is?
I honestly think we're looking at a minimum of 4. I think we might hit 5, potentially
Guys, buckle
6.
in.
I hope not. If it gets up to 5, 6, there will likely be a 1 episode break somewhere in the 2-3 mark to break up the atmosphere a little bit, because it starts bad and just gets worse, and it never stops getting
I'm going
bad.
to find a bunch of internet mysteries so Mathis doesn't lose his mind is what's going to happen.
It's all right, dude. I've already read the books. I've already lost my mind. I just have to relive it now as I make scripts. So Project MK Ultra is one of the darkest, most shameful and gruesome points within human history. While it's true that MK Ultra was a US focused project, like a lot of other horrendous things in the world, MK Ultra was not an overnight decision, and its roots date back decades before the project ever saw the light of day, involving a chain of events that all involve human experimentation, the deaths of tens of thousands in the process, all leading up to the fateful launch of MK Ultra in 1953. At its core, the plan behind MK Ultra was to create a breakthrough within psychological warfare, true mind control. And for a decade, from 1953 to 1963, under heavy secrecy, through the means of forced drugging, psychiatry, and straight out-and-out torture, that was what the US attempted to do. Now, before we fully dive in, I want to shout out our 2 main sources for this particular episode, on top of a myriad of internet sources: Poisoner-in-Chief Sidney Gottlieb, and the CIA Search for Mind Control by author Stephen Kinzer, and the second book, The Search for the Manchurian Candidate, the CIA and Mind Control, The Secret History of Behavioral Sciences by Dr. John D. Marks. And of course, a huge shout out to Deanna for coming through the muck with me and just going through all of this and helping me create this series of episodes, because it wasn't fun for parts of that. But thank
This is
God
like
we
real
weren't
life,
alone.
actual stakes, mad scientists. It's
Yes,
like
and
so crazy.
Well, yeah. Well, welcome to the MK Ultra series, everybody. That's what this is. MK Ultra, in my belief, is one of the prime reasons that modern conspiracy still thrives as heavily as it does today. When asked for proof that projects can be kept under wraps for so long and terrible things can happen for years without a single public person really knowing or leaking it, MK Ultra is one of the examples people tend to point to. And it's true. This project was tightly under wraps for a decade plus. And even I would argue after the court hearings, most people didn't pay too much attention to it thereafter. It is one of the conspiracy theories that ended up being fact. And of course, the matter of our country wanting to bury this as deeply as possible, because when you start to truly dig, you realize how evil the US was during the beginnings of it all, and likely still never stopped being such.
Yeah,
And
like if you're the type of person that Googled us to find us to see if we existed as a show, you probably already know about this, but I feel like the average person might not.
This is for me, I think, like as a younger, like back in my early 20s or whenever I really learned about this for the first time, was one of those moments was like, oh, the US isn't the greatest country in the world. I got you. Like, it's just like one of those,
No, it turns out
wake up moments.
New Zealand. No.
It's Norway.
Yeah.
But we aren't starting there. We're not starting in 1953 with the launch of Project MK Ultra. Instead, we're going back nearly 2 decades. MK Ultra, in a sense, begins in Japan with a man by the name of Shiro Ishii, when the US allowed him to surrender on August 15th in 1945 in return for all the information that Shiro Ishii attained during his experiments at a place called Unit 731 during the Second World War. The 2 of you know what Unit 731 is? I imagine Jesse probably don't. No, you
Is
don't.
that
I
when
don't know what
they
that is.
exposed the iguana to radiation and then it got real big?
No. Okay, so we're going to teach you some things. Unit 731, which was during the Second World War. He would be saved from being hung and protected from the Soviets so long as he was loyal to the US from that point on. And of course, he accepted. But let's talk a little bit about who he was and what Unit 731 was. Born in 1892, Shiro Ishii was the son of a local landowner and sake maker. He'd grow up to study medicine at Kyoto Imperial University. very shortly after his graduation in 1921, Japan commissioned Ishii into the Imperial Japanese Army with the rank of Army Surgeon Second Class. But it wouldn't be until 1922, after impressing his supervisors at the First Army Hospital and being recommended for postgraduate medical training and going back to Kyoto Imperial Hospital, that his love for microbiology truly began. Here, Ishii would often grow bacteria within petri dishes and call them his little pets. This pastime would become the thing that really defined the rest of his life. Because after years of faithful service to the Japanese Army, including 2 years of touring medical facilities in the West, including the United States, and heavily advocating the Japanese government for research into biological warfare in 1927, Ishii would get that wish and then some. In 1935, under the guise of a complex titled the Epidemic and Water Purification Bureau, the construction of Unit 731 had been fully completed in a long, remote tract of land. And in 1936, Shiraishi was given Unit 731, with express permission and intent to conduct experiments on human subjects to master techniques of germ warfare. So that was what Unit 731 ended up being. It's a place where human experimentation happened. For 6 years, between 1930s, people that were shipped in from all over. Remember, this is all happening during World War II.
And this was in Japan?
No, it was outside Japan in a countryside part of China. Japan was doing it, but they were doing it in another country.
So they would probably doing it on the Chinese then. Is
Likely.
My assumption.
I would imagine so. Yeah, I would imagine so. Not a detail I particularly dug for.
Japan was doing a lot of like inland stuff with China for sure. Yeah.
That makes sense. Like I said, for 6 years they did this between 1936 and 1942, where somewhere between 3,000 and 12,000 people met their excruciating ends. Inhumanly referred to
12,000?
Between 3,000 and 12,000. We don't have a definitive number. We don't know. These people who died were inhumanly referred to as nothing more than, quote, logs to those who ended up delivering them to Unit 731 from wherever they were taken. A warning now for those who might be a little sensitive to gruesome details, because the experiments within Unit 731 were things ripped straight out of a nightmare, including exposure to poison gases to then remove the lungs and observe them afterward. Long-term exposure to electricity to determine what voltage would cause death. Hanging people upside down to observe the process of natural choking. Locked in high-pressure chambers until eyes were popped from their sockets. Spun relentlessly in centrifuges. Infected with anthrax, syphilis, plague, cholera, and more. Infant vivisection. Bound to stakes as flamethrowers were tested on them.
What?
Exposure to freezing temperatures to observe the effects of hypothermia. Injecting air into people to provoke embolisms. Injections of animal blood to observe reactions. Living dissections. Living amputations to observe death by bleeding and gangrene. Groups of men, women, and children exposed to anthrax shrapnel bombs to observe time until death, which never ended up being more than a week. And finally, forced pregnancy and abortions.
Oh my God.
There's a little list of things that they did at Unit 731 for 6 fucking years.
So just for clarification's sake, just for the sake of like everyone who's like, holy crap. Japan during this time period, like many, I'm going to say just in general, and when you qualify yourself as an empire or imperialist, most of the times that means you view other people as less than you. So,
yes.
Europe had some imperialist tendencies. America had imperialist tendencies. The things America did to natives and people of, island countries and things were not great.
No, not at all.
Even after. But anyway, during this time, Japan was an imperialist nation and they were trying to expand, and they just like many other imperialist nations, see themselves as above others. And China, in this case, was, the Chinese, they were viewed as lesser than by the Japanese at the time. I'm not sure what it was actually called, but the invasion of China was literally like a crusade. It was crusade. They had like it was like the under one roof policy or something. I'm not sure what the official name was, but the idea was like, what if all of Asia came under our control? Was the vibe. And so they pretty much were, if it's the same thing with Germany. If you don't view certain people as being human, you can do all sorts of messed up stuff to them. And that's
isn't
the same
another
vibe
example
here.
That is Manifest Destiny for the United States when we decided we deserved all of the land. That was our goal or what have you.
People be doing this. People be doing this
done forever.
all the time.
Yeah. And it continues.
That is absolutely one of the big things here. So when you hear them be like, they did this horrible thing and this horrible thing, you're like, how could anyone do that at this time period from like 1937 to 1945 ish?
Yeah.
Japan was like, it's all right to do this because we're better than them. And that's pretty much what the vibe was.
We're destined to be better than. Exactly.
Yeah.
And for 6 years, they conducted quote unquote research. And with this research, technicians at Unit 731 ended up creating various undercover biological weapons like poisoned chocolate and gum, hairpins and fountain pens rigged with toxin needles.
Poison chocolate and gum?
Yeah.
What shit were they making?
A ton. They were making a lot of stuff.
What the fuck happened to all the poison gum, dude?
My mans, you hold on to whatever happened to, because you're going to be asking that more than once in this entire episode.
I want to know the body count for chocolate and gum.
What I wonder, and this is like, again, history teacher Jesse, I wonder, so when Japan invaded China, they could take the big cities because that was easy, right? But the countryside was so wide that it was impossible for the Japanese forces, because Japan is infinitely smaller than China, right? And so it's impossible for all the forces of Japan to take over all of China. So the countryside was kind of like, there's nothing we can do about that. There's gonna be roving bands of like rebels. I wonder if it was like, make the food poison and then we just kill them.
Hold on to that, because like on top of the poisoned food, but you might be onto something there, because like I said, they had hairpins and fountain pens rigged with toxin needles. But on top of that, they had an industrial scale laboratories that existed to breed plague infested fleas while producing large amounts of anthrax that were placed in bomb casings.
Damn, this is how Mathis plays 4X games.
This is fuck all of you.
I mean, but that's one of those like really messed up war things.
Dude, it's
like
nuts.
Look, we gave Native American smallpox blankets because we were like, that'll do the trick. So
unbelievable.
It's nuts. This place was enormous, and you can see pictures of it online actually if you look it up. But even with its enormous size and industrial scale human experimentation, it was near impossible to prove that Unit 731 existed while it operated. As the war began obviously coming to an end, Ishii, who had run the place since its inception, ordered the execution of every remaining prisoner while distributing cyanide pills to his soldiers and scientists with the express order to take their secrets to their grave should they be captured. After orders were given and prisoners executed, the final move from Ishii was the order to destroy the entire complex with explosives. Fun fact, towards the end of the war, Ishii was actually developing a plan to spread the plague fleas along the population of the U.S. West Coast, known as Operation Cherry Blossoms at Night. That was what he was working on when he blew the place up.
Jesus fucking Christ.
Yeah, good times. But the
At
war,
least
as we
that
know,
didn't happen. Holy God.
No. That would have been awful. But obviously the war came to an end, and Ishii ended up fleeing back to his hometown to live with his daughter. But it wouldn't be long before he was found by the Counterintelligence Corps and was arrested and brought to Tokyo, where he would be interviewed with U.S. scientists for 4 weeks. After a rigorous interview process, the U.S. approached Ishii with an ultimatum. Give the Americans what he knew and prove to be an asset to the country worth protecting, or stay silent and see what happens when the Soviets get their hands on him.
Damn, man, that's what a crazy time period to just not only be alive, but just to be in the military. The idea that World War II ends with the Americans and Soviets united against Germany and Japan, and then immediately the moment it ends being like, and now we're in another war. Yeah, and immediately we're enemies.
So that time period, like, it's fucked up right now. You know what I mean? Like, it's really scary. Like, every day right now, I'm not like fucking around, but like the mentality that that people had just like not even 100 years ago, like 80 years ago,
Yeah.
It's like fucking like it's mind blowing. It's like so brutal. It's insane.
You actually do have, like, keep in mind as we go through this sounds like ancient history. This was 80 fucking years ago. This was not long ago at all. So
there's color pictures of this time.
Yeah, so while this was people in their 70s were born in the 40s. So just
they were born when this was happening. It's nuts. So while obviously this was worth something this is something that Ishii desired to hand it all over and be an asset worth protecting. He also wasn't stupid. The US wanted that information, and even risking it, handing it over to the Soviets wasn't something they were likely to do. So Ishii would accept with some additions to the deal. He would be given documentary immunity for himself, but in addition, his superiors and his subordinates involved in Unit 731 would also be given immunity.
How many people are we talking?
I don't have an exact number, but enough to run a complex of that size.
I mean, yeah, this would be like NASA when NASA was like, give us all your Germans. You're like, what?
Do you imagine there was like a factory of like 2,000 scientists and soldiers like torturing people all the time? Or are we talking like 400 people? Or
I would put it, my guess, somewhere between 500 and 1,000 maybe.
That's so
crazy.
If
they were going through, 10, like anywhere between 3,000 and 12,000 people, whoever knows how many, I don't know. But that deal was put forward by Ishii, and with a simple stroke of a pen from General MacArthur, the human monster that was Shiro Ishii and every single person that worked around him and participated or knew about or were involved in Unit 731 were all completely immune from every human war crime they had just committed.
It doesn't even seem real. Like, it's so awful that it's like, it like my mind like goes to comic book territory, like how crazy it is.
But we did the same thing on the East Coast, right? The idea like all the Germans that were doing terrible shit, like we had to get them before the Russians got them. Like,
no, absolutely.
You're all skipping ahead in my episode.
It's just crazy. That's
the thing. Like, this is where the seed of Project MK Ultra was, in my mind, ultimately planted. This is where it all began. And this one action, just setting them all immune, would set the standard for countless more moving forward. Ishii began by handing over countless documents, just giant boxes packed with data from their torture. I have personally hesitated to call it experimentation or anything like remotely scientific, but that's what they called it.
Who did he give this to?
The U.S. government.
So they just swept him up and he had it. He had it all stored up. He hadn't destroyed it yet. They had details on how various toxins affected the human body, how toxins could be spread, as well as the dosage levels needed to most effectively take the life of an individual. And the American scientists were like,
hell yes. Suffice to say, the U.S. was pleased with this and found it all incredibly valuable, especially in terms of potential future warfare, as we tend to only think about the destruction of other people as a country.
We can use this.
For non-history people out there who are just, could care less about the history aspect of this.
This is necessary.
Think about Captain America, the movies, the MCU, and the little nerdy scientist from the first Captain America movie gets captured by Tommy Lee Jones. And in the second Captain America movie is like, spoilers, in a computer and shit. The time between that moment and when he got captured, he was working for Americans and coming up with all sorts of evil schemes. That's that kind of thing. It's that storyline.
But that's all based on. Real life. It's all based on
real life, that shit happened. Yeah.
He just didn't get it. He was just old as fuck. He didn't get into a computer.
He wasn't a computer at the end.
He was just an old piece of shit. Yeah.
He's just an old piece of human shit. Mm-hmm. But he handed over literally countless documents over. But Ishii had even more. He then guided U.S. government officials up large mountains over the course of days and introduced them and showed them hidden away at various temples.
In Japan?
Yes. He brought those he swore his newfound loyalty to his other evidence. Ishii and those who had aided him in the destruction of human life had hidden away 15,000 microscope slides.
What?
In the mountains and temples throughout the country, with each one containing a sliver of human tissue from victims' kidneys, livers, spleens, as well as organs that had been collected from victims who had died from extreme temperature, anthrax, botulism, bubonic plague, cholera, dysentery, smallpox, typhoid, tuberculosis, gangrene, and syphilis.
This is like some Dexter shit. This is like fucking insane.
Is.
What's really messed up, and this is going to be like If you haven't ever thought about this, listener, just know this is the truth, and it's shocking and awful. Most of modern medicine in the 70s, 80s, and 90s comes from all the shit that all these terrible people did.
Yep.
And without them doing, it's like sort of the olden days of science back in the Middle Ages and into the Renaissance, when they were like, oh, what is this thing inside of your chest? Well, let's cut in there and find out. Like that kind of thing. That kind of messed up stuff. But the more modern version where they were like, what happens if we do this to the human body? And all that information, like all that, like, how does hypothermia work? That's because some messed up dude somewhere froze a person.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And like, we're briefly covering this, and we're going to briefly cover another project, but them themselves are gateways to other enormous, like, secret things that happen in our country that we'll one day cover. But right now we have to stay focused on one. With physical evidence to coincide with the documented effects now firmly in the hands of the US, this to them would prove to be invaluable. No longer needing to start from scratch, their knowledge of biological warfare jumped with the stroke of a pen. And now they were a step ahead of all their perceived enemies. And let's be real, has the US ever been one to want to be excluded from being the best at anything? Now, they now had an entire cast of people who were extremely skilled at human torture and documenting it. And the US, ever so hungry for the next best weapon, would never want to, and we'd never, as the US, want to waste good human resources. And so instead of bringing all of those scientists that we just gave immunity to America, they were instead installed in laboratories and detention centers all across East Asia. You might be asking yourself, that's kind of weird. Why would the US do that? You know, it really is confusing until you learn that testing on human subjects is illegal in the US, and at the time would be hard to do so. So instead, the US employed these people installed in places with plenty of imprisoned humans at their fingertips to help America not only to conceive, but consequently continue conducting said experiments on human beings for us.
It's like Guantanamo Labs.
Yes, that's exactly correct.
Yeah.
They took them all and like, well, at least you know what you're doing. Continue, please. And that was it. And if you were to think, well, at least the US waited until they discovered this before they took an interest in it, prepare yourself for even more disappointment, because we're going to go now and rewind back to the next chess piece that all plays into MK Ultra. From 1945 back to 1942. Biological warfare was very clearly becoming a fever pitch worldwide as the war raged on, and a scientist named Ira Baldwin, among a dissenting group of his peers, assured the National Academy of Sciences in Washington, which at the time convened under Churchill and Roosevelt, that they could in fact create a hermetically sealed container to produce dangerous germs on an industrial scale. They were not aware that Japan had already created such a place with the added benefit of human torture in Unit 731. And after meeting, though, it seemed that his pitch had failed as they sent Ira Baldwin home, and he went back to being a regular scientist with evil goals instead of actually becoming an evil scientist. But the US is full of surprises, and General W.C. Cabrick of the Chemical Services reached out to Baldwin and asked him to return to Washington for a visit. Baldwin, once again hopeful that they were asking him to return, took a leave of absence from his job and quickly returned to Washington, where he was offered to begin the construction of such a site.
The Metal Gear program.
Yes, the Metal Gear program. And from here, the Hallelujah was created. And from here, the next 2.5 years, Baldwin served with the title Scientific Director of Biological Warfare Laboratories. But get this, he wasn't officially part of the government. He served the entire time, technically, as a civilian. After accepting the gig, the first step was to figure out where it was going to be built. Wanting to keep it convenient, they decided on Detrick Field, later renamed to Camp Detrick and known as Fort Detrick as the place was being built. It was only 50 miles from Washington, somewhere in Maryland, not too far from Frederickson, ensuring it nice and close for the Army. And over the course of 3 months, it was built. Over $4 million was spent in 1942, starting on March 9th, 1943, rather. In 2020 currency, that's a little over $63 million.
It sounds like the government for sure.
Yep.
It sounds like Hellboy. It sounds like the X-Men. It sounds fucking crazy. What are you talking about? Sounds like the Weapon X program.
Oh, dude. Yeah, no, it is. This is why people, like I said in the beginning, I think this is this is one of the reasons people buy so easily into conspiracy theories.
I'm just going to put this out there. And one day, if I ever can truly find enough information on this, I want to do an episode. This is the United States government has always dabbled in crazy shit. My favorite World War II story is Roosevelt was like, okay, I'm hearing that Hitler wants to find like a bunch of ancient lost relics. We're going to need to make a team of relic hunters. And they're like, what? And he's like, if they do exist, we need a team out there. And so they made a team of people who their job was to go around and try to find like the Ark. And like
Dr. Henry Jones Jr.
That's what I'm saying.
Hellboy.
It's
the
like
Rocketeer.
It's like a real
that up in the Hollow Earth episode,
it's
actually.
like a real thing that happened. Obviously, no one found nothing that we know of.
Wolverine, Captain America.
That shit, they were like, well, we can't not do it. And this is what's happening now during this time period through the late 40s into the 50s. So like, well, if the Russians have mind control, we can't not have mind control. That's exactly what this shit is. It's crazy.
It really is the premise of nearly every move they make. It's Jesse's dead on that.
They should just get screenwriters to be like, that's stupid. No.
Right?
That would never fly. No one would believe that.
No one. Yeah, God. However, the place wouldn't truly get to work until sometime in early 1944. We're under claim that they were scared. We're under the claim that they were scared that the Nazis would launch a last-ditch bioattack on Britain as they were losing. Churchill and Roosevelt decided to order from that place 500,000 anthrax spore bomblets. To fill such an order, Ira Baldwin was estimating they need literal tons of anthrax to accomplish it. And even after the Nazi surrender in 1945, that place was still producing that particular order.
I'm almost like thankful that nukes happened because it skipped like the horrific like bioweapon apocalypse phase of human history, because nukes are so much worse.
Baldwin was actually sent home in the middle of that order, the scientist, feeling super accomplished for all the work that he'd helped America do. But before we get to that, the question I have is like, okay, where did they finish the order and where did all of them go?
It's probably like someday they're going to like be digging in a churchyard somewhere and like some like weird bug is going to start crawling out and everybody's going to become bug zombies.
Yeah, it's weird. This place had over 200 different projects running at any given time. None of them, as far as we are aware, were human experimentation, but a couple of the ones that they were working on was producing industrial quantities of anthrax spores, obviously, breeding mosquitoes who were infected with yellow fever.
What a fucking dangerous, stupid ass fucking thing that is to do.
To do in Maryland.
What a stupid fucking thing. Can you imagine if like death mosquitoes just descended on Washington, D.C. and just the whole government died because of yellow fever? Because some fucking asshole decided to like make a fucking farm of death.
This next one is my favorite project. It was called the Pigeon Bomb. It was a bird whose feathers were coated in toxic spores.
What the fuck does that mean?
I mean, that's most pigeons. Let's not pretend.
How is that a fucking precise weapon? How is it targeted at anyone?
It's not. Okay, but one of my favorite anecdotes for this episode came from that, because as I was researching that specifically, I was like, I don't understand.
Kill homeless people.
I came across another project that was happening in 1944 called Project Pigeon. I'm just gonna give you a quick breakdown of Project Pigeon. 1 to 3 pigeons trained by operant conditioning to recognize a target were stationed in front of a screen. When they saw the target, they would peck at the screen with their beaks. As long as the target remained at the center of the screen would not move. But if the bomb began to go off track, the image would move towards the edge of the screen, and the pigeons would follow the image pecking at it, which would move the screen on its pivots. The sensor would detect the movement and send signals to the control surfaces, which would steer the bomb in the direction of the screen had moved. Yeah, these pigeons are steering bombs, by the way. That's what this is. As the bomb swung back towards the target, the pigeon would again follow the image, bringing the screen back to the centered position again. In that way, the pigeons would correct any deviations in the course and keep the bomb on its gliding path.
This is like when they're like, all right, we're going to teach these dolphins how to stick landmines. Like, this is like, you know what? I mean, you have to feel like as human beings, we would at some point been like, if a dog can do this, how do we train other animals to do? It's like insane when you look at it in hindsight. But at the time, you have to imagine they're like, well, if Rover can catch this ball, surely this pigeon can deliver a bomb.
It's so good.
Something about animals being involved. It's like when it's like, imagine it's like in a fantasy movie, the humans, they're getting pummeled by the orcs. The elves haven't helped the humans in 3,000 years. And then it's like,
and then the eagles show up,
and then like bird weapons, and they're like, send the bird weapons, the bird folk, and the birds like steer bombs into the fucking goblins. Like there's something there's something like
well, you are right. There's something crazy because the National Defense Research Committee saw the idea to use pigeons and glide bombs as very eccentric and impractical. But they still contributed $25,000 to the research. And again, that's in 1944
just
money.
Wanted frickin' pigeons that could frickin' steer the bombs, okay?
Throw me a freaking bone.
Throw me a freaking bone. Throw me a freaking a spore, please.
That could be a fucking plot point in that goddamn movie.
Throw me a fucking spore.
I just want pigeons with spores on them.
Skinner, who was the one who created the project and had some success with the training, complained, quote, "Our problem was no one would take us seriously," end quote. The program was canceled on October 8th, 1944, because the military believed that further prosecution of the project would seriously delay others in the minds of the division.
Hey, they had nukes to make.
The fucking report goes across the general's desk and it's like, bombs steered by pigeons. And he's like, Skinner?
You'd think that, but Project Pigeon was then revived by the Navy in 1948 as Project Orkin. But it was canceled in 1953 when the reliability of electronic guidance systems was proven.
What's genuinely crazy, just think about the time period, 1944. On one side of the country, scientists have gathered to split the atom. And on the other side of the country, they're like, all right, pigeons, we need you to guide this
I think
bomb.
a bird can fly the bomb. Let's try again. Cooler name.
I'm so glad I found that damn stupid
name.
project.
Change the name. The problem was the name.
Project Orkin, it's fine. But it literally somehow lasted 5 years in that incarnation.
How many pigeons died for nothing? How many pigeons blew up with ordnance? And who did they blow up? Can you imagine the humiliation of that?
Oh my god!
Seeing like,
but imagine if the project worked to the point where we use it today, and you're dying from pigeon bombing.
That's Dinotopia.
Not drone
that's
bombing,
fucking Dinotopia.
pigeon bombing.
That's not real. That's Dinotopia.
That's just like when today people are like, these fly-sized listening drones, and I'm like, time out. No one's made a drone look like a fly. They can just, if they want to hear you, they can point a fucking thing at you from like 8 miles away and hear your ass.
Oh, to be a fly-sized listening drone on the wall of that room.
Yeah, like in the 80s, we had that technology.
A satellite can literally just pinpoint you and look at you. People are like, well, that fly drone clearly landed. Like, what are you talking about? The fly drone?
Yeah, it's like a dude with like 2 levers and he's like flying it in like a warehouse.
I'm going in for the landing. I can see Pence's head. Like pulling.
But now I want to believe that at the same time a guy was like, this satellite can get pinpoint accuracy and hear every cover. And there's another guy like, I have created a fly drone. The exact same time.
It's like, don't come crying to me in the singularity.
So Camp Detrick is half of the puzzle pieces now in play for what I believe to be the beginnings of MK Ultra. The next one is not as bad. Now all this was happening on the biological warfare front. There was still another discovery happening in the 40s. I know all this seems bizarrely disjointed for a subject that doesn't start for another decade, but I promise all of this comes together. On April 16th, 1943, in a lab in Basel, Switzerland, Dr. Albert Hoffman discovered LSD-25 while he was experimenting with the ergot enzyme while trying to improve circulation in the blood. The result in the experiments became what would later be known as a trip,
Ascension.
Not coined until the 70s, and LSD-25 would simply be known as LSD soon after. But the results baffled him.
What was LSD 1 through 24?
I know. I don't know, man.
Oh my God. What the hell is that?
But the results baffled him, unsure of what to even do with his new discovery. He thought perhaps maybe it'd help in the future in research of the biochemical aspect of mental illness. But his own experiments were sporadic at best and totally inconclusive. He didn't really, so basically he discovered it and he didn't see it all that useful. He dabbled with it and just kind of shelved it.
Thank God
it wasn't
for
really
Pink
something.
Floyd, right?
Yeah. Eventually, though, the winds of some weird chemical were caught in the U.S. in 1949 by L. Wilson Green, a chemical and radiological laboratories director. He heard of the discovery of this new chemical and was enraptured by it, gathering every ounce of information on the LSD discovery and producing a report on what else. The report was called, quote, Psychochemical Warfare, a new concept of war, which, of course, concluded with a strong urge that the U.S. begin systematically testing LSD, mescaline, and 60 other mind-altering compounds that might be weaponized against enemy populations.
Simultaneously, some new supervillain, Acid Man, burst onto the scene, and no one knew his identity.
In 1 year after LSD's discovery, which was 1944, the final piece of the bizarre puzzle that is the origins of MK Ultra was placed. As the war came to a close, and it was clear as such, Roosevelt was then presented with a question. They'd have on their hands thousands of Nazis with information that could very feasibly quickly end the war at hand and potentially solidify the U.S. as a major dominant power for decades to come after the war ended. And so he was posited with, quote, should Nazi spies with information on the Soviet Union be given immunity from prosecution and permitted to enter the U.S.? This question was brought forward by William Donovan, director of the Office of Secret Services. It's important to note, however, that Roosevelt declined and refused, saying, quote, the carrying out of any such guarantees would be difficult and probably be widely misunderstood by both in this country and abroad.
Then he died. Then he died.
Don't jump ahead of me yet, Jesse.
Oh, all right, sorry. Then he died.
We may expect that the number of Germans who are anxious to save their skins and property will rapidly increase. Among them may be some who should properly be tried for war crimes, or at least arrested for active participation in Nazi activities. Even with the necessary controls you mentioned, I am not prepared to authorize the giving of guarantees. Roosevelt was ignored. Weeks after Roosevelt's death in 1945, Colonel Reinhard Gehlen, a senior Nazi intelligence officer, surrendered to American forces and quickly made a deal with the OSS to turn over his spy network in exchange. He was given legal protection and a generous stipend for some reason. We gave him a bunch of money.
Just like a one-time big-ass fee of money?
Yep, a one-time generous stipend. And with that, a precedent was set for turned officers. And soon after, one would be set for scientists of the Nazi variety. This spurred on the creation of a brand new, fun covert service in the U.S., the Joint Intelligence Objectives Agency, with a single purpose.
Protecting
Nazis.
Find
and recruit. Oh, you are absolutely correct. Find and recruit Nazi scientists seeking to isolate them so they could not fuel Germany's war vessel, the Soviets, and if desirable to the U.S., arrange them brand new jobs with brand new names and identities and histories. Over at Kransberg Castle in Germany, over at the Kransberg Castle Interrogation Center in Germany, clerks had actually been using paper clips to mark files of the prisoners whose backgrounds presented, quote, the most troublesome of cases. These are the now turned over Nazi scientists and so on. It is unsurprising then that this is where the name for the, I guess you could call it faded. I'd say this is the most well-known faded kind of secret project of the U.S. at this time came from. Project Paperclip, as had been officially been born simply because the ones that they wanted had a paperclip on them. In an attempt to make this somewhat more legit, in 1946 September, President Truman drew up a new order which authorized the issuance of up to 1,000 visas for German and Austrian scientists, quote, in the interest of national security, with a big caveat. It specifically forbid cooperation with anyone who had been, quote, a member of the Nazi Party and more than a nominal participant in its activities or an active supporter of Nazi militarism, end quote.
And because of that, no Nazis ever worked with the American government ever again. The end.
I can do you one better. 3 words. This was ignored.
I thought you were going to say, yes, we can.
No, they just ignored the president. And this is another one of those situations where, you know, people say like, well, can't the president just say no? He gets ignored. If that's not what the military industrial complex and the intelligence agency wants, the president straight up gets ignored. The operation's main goal was to recruit German rocket scientists whose work producing missiles that killed thousands of civilians over in London and European cities during the Second World War would have certainly disqualified them from the official directive. Unfortunately, like I said, all that shit was ignored. And now we could dive into Project Paperclip really, really deeply here, because Project Paperclip is a lot of our scientific breakthroughs, and arguably the reason we won the space race against Russia is where it all comes from. The testing on vacuum patients and all kind of the effects of a vacuum on a body. Sorry, my own words are escaping me here. All that shit comes from Project Paperclip and the work they did thereafter. That's why we're going to actually step away from Project Paperclip and just know that that's where a bunch of our kind of more nefarious scientists and experimentation information came from.
Yeah,
Jesse,
just really.
I
just want to point out that Werner von Braun, who was the chief architect of Nazi like V1, V2 rockets, is the guy responsible for the Saturn launch vehicle that got us to the moon. So just, the guy who was developing like missiles for the Nazis is also the same guy that got us to the moon.
He also put the first human brain into the immortal body of a mecha gorilla. So, lots of stuff on his resume.
Yeah. I also apparently, and this is, I don't know the truth of this, but it's something for people to look up. Apparently, Operation Paperclip didn't officially cease existing until 1990.
Oh,
like witness protection vibes.
Yeah, like they we're gonna keep this under wraps.
Yep.
Until all these guys die.
Till 1990. Which I just want to point out, I was 9 years old at that point. So
did they reveal all of the guys?
I have to imagine that some point during my childhood, this became a thing that were there books and stuff about Operation Paperclip in the
in the 90s? I don't know.
You continue. I'm looking this up.
Did we not know about it until the 90s?
That's what I'm wondering.
I do think we know about it because the book that we read was a little older, and this is where a lot of this information is coming from.
Okay, so maybe we're just talking about the actual.
But maybe they just kept it under wraps, and everybody thought it was done or something for a long time. Because ultimately, over 100 scientists, engineers, and other technical specialists who had served the Nazi Germany came to the U.S. on paperclip contracts. So we got over 100 of them, and they got new names, new histories, and everything. So we wouldn't even necessarily know who they were. After the war ended, the Chemical Warfare Services was actually renamed to simply Chemical Corps. And the commanders proposed opening the paperclip pipeline to include Jesse, this is probably why it went to further later on into the 90s, because what ended up happening here is they renamed their warfare services, and then they widened the paperclip pipeline to also include physicians, chemists, and biologists who could give them the results of experiments that had been conducted at concentration camps. So they were they were like, man, this makes the US such a piece of shit, dude. It's just because you actually get presented this in a lot of other RPGs. The one that comes to mind is Mass Effect 2. You remember that mission with Mortis, where he comes across the science lab where they were doing experiments against
illegal
beings
shit
and stuff, and you have to make a decision of do you send the information off to the government or do you destroy it? US decided to keep it on to themselves and then bring more people in. They were actively looking for more people that worked at concentration camps and did experiments on people so that they could bring them into the US and give them contracts. The proposal was accepted by Paperclip, and the scientists were given assignments at Camp Detrick. So a lot of the scientists that were recruited went right over to Camp Detrick. These scientists taught the Americans how to create sarin gas, which was developed in Germany and was exceptionally promising for battle use. Sarin gas is actually, I don't know if you would remember this, Jesse. You would have been 10 at this time.
The subway bombing or whatever?
Yes, the Tokyo subway bombings by the Aum Shinrikyo clan, the Aum Shinrikyo cult, rather, in 1995. That's what they used.
That's a whole crazy story there.
That's a whole other topic we could do at any given point. If one day we're going to crack into cults, I would love to do a cult series at some point,
dude,
but I'm not ready to do it yet.
I'll go either every other week with you on cults.
I would love cults, or I would love it.
We could do a competition to see who can do the most cults without falling behind.
Losing their mind. Yeah. Yeah. That I would love to. I'm down. We should talk about a cult month or something when we just do cults. Okay. Anyway, but that ends Project Paperclip. the last bit that we're going to talk about are a few very quick trials that followed in the late 40s and the effects that happened from those trials and what we ended up gaining from them.
Oh.
Before we wrap up the first episode, which in my opinion is going to be the shortest of the episodes as we lay a foundation for MK Ultra.
We are 1/4 of the way through this one.
I want to point this out. My perception of history is clearly tainted by just the life that I've led and the years I've been alive. Turns out, like all good news reporters, Operation Paperclip wasn't unveiled in some book or something. The New York Times was one of the first media outlets to expose that it exists in December of 1946.
Wow. So we not only did we know about it almost immediately, but it kept going for decades anyway.
I imagine it might have been one of those things like with most newspapers where someone reveals something exists and then half the country is like, no way we do that.
Yeah, that's fair enough. And you think that we were riding a post-war high and kind of think of like US can do no wrong kind of thing. Yeah, I bet you there's a lot that plays into that for sure.
I've never heard of Americans just deciding that something wasn't true. That's not like
never
us.
happened in our lifetime.
That's not like us.
Not
that's
at all,
also,
dude.
I mean, that's also one of those things that, it also could be over the 50s and 60s when America sort of like, we're perfect and we do nothing wrong. That, we could have whitewashed that history. A great example going back to Japan and the things Japan did to China. I know it's
none of this. Not to cut you off, but like none of this stuff is taught in history classes anywhere.
I mean, now stuff like this is for sure.
When I was growing up, at least.
Right. Yeah. Oh, it also depends on where you grow up, too.
Fair
what
enough.
state. But a great example of just history in general and how things can, over time be sort of removed and then younger people don't know much about it is Japan, for example, when they invaded China. A very famous moment was the Nanjing, or I guess it's also Nanking massacre, but it's more famously known as the Rape of Nanjing or the Rape of Nanking, where literally Japanese soldiers like murdered 400,000 people.
It's like a modern day atrocity. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Like raped and murdered all these people. And currently it is one of those things that's like barely mentioned in Japanese history books. And there are many Japanese people who, many's wrong. That's not true. There are some, but I think just like everywhere, even people who are like, there's no
like
Holocaust
deniers.
Yeah. There's some people who said it never happened. And it's that kind of thing where, and I've always going like totally off topic, but like, I think Alex knows where I'm going with this. I've always been like, how the hell in the Star Wars universe do people not know what Jedi are 20 years after the Jedi existed?
I was having these conversations as a kid myself. I was like, it doesn't make any sense.
Right. You know what? The more you learn about history, the more you're like, holy shit, that might be possible. That might be a thing. True. That like, if you have an empire that keeps being like, they were bad people.
Propaganda.
Yeah.
All it takes. It's universal propaganda.
It's wild, man.
This brings us to the trial of Kurt Blohm in 1947. It was under a paperclip contract that this doctor, a Nazi director of research into biological warfare, was actually almost brought into the United States. The Chemical Corps interviewed Blohm when he was detained at Kranzberg Castle, where we stationed a bunch of people to do some human experiments. It was determined that his information would actually be useful.
Oh, I'm so dumb. Oh, sorry. I just had the revelation that, of course, everyone knew about Operation Paperclip. Dr. Strangelove is literally Operation Paperclip.
Right. Oh, yeah.
I'm so dumb. It just like totally. I was like, what am I talking about?
I know of Dr. Strangelove. I've never seen Dr. Strangelove.
You would love that movie.
It's a wacky movie. It's a wacky
crazy.
one.
It is a Mathis film. You would love that. And,
There's a lot of Mathis films out there.
What is a Mathis film? What does that mean?
It's just right up your alley.
I'll take it. That's fine.
Have you ever seen Men in Black, Mathis?
It's great.
I have seen Men in Black.
It's basically the same movie.
Oh, sweet. Sex, man. I'm into it. Let's do it. Let's watch it. I'm excited for a talking dog.
Yeah.
It should be a good time.
He's so wise. He's so streetwise.
So Blohm's research actually had his own research complex, which is why he was of interest to the United States, officially known as the Central Cancer Institute. It was surrounded by 10-foot walls and guarded by a detachment from the Nazi SS. So, definitely doing cancer research
in his ice fortress.
Institute.
Yeah.
It contained a climate room, a cold room, incubators, deep freezers, and steam chambers. Laboratories dedicated to virology, pharmacology, radiology, and bacteriology. A tumor farm where malignant viruses were cultivated, and an isolation hospital for scientists who might be accidentally infected.
It is so fucking insane to me that they were like in the 40s. Like, we got this.
And this is the third one we're learning about just in episode 1 that happened within about 4 years of each other. Like, all of it. The Detrick field, the Japanese one, and this one.
That's what war does. Times of war is when technology leaps forward.
The flu, the Spanish flu was like not that old. Like, how did they not realize how dangerous?
Well, I think they did. I think it's the point is they realized the flu killed more people than the war. And I think, and people, they were like, all right, how do we use that to our
advantage? The way to kill people.
I mean, yeah.
That leave it to the human race to like have something like that happen and be like, yo, viruses are badass, bro. Let me get one of those viruses.
So you might be wondering why then. Great, sure. Okay, he had all this stuff, but what is it about Blome that they wanted specifically? Well, Blome had developed aerosol delivery systems for nerve gas to be tested on inmates at the Auschwitz concentration camp. He also bred infected mosquitoes and lice to be tested on inmates at the Dachau and Buchenwald camps and produced gas for the use in killing of over 35,000 prisoners at camps in Poland where patients with tuberculosis were being held. Blome was tried at what's known as the doctor's trial at Nuremberg, where he put up a two-pronged defense. One, no one could corroborate that he had actually done the things that he had written about, that the things that he had documented and journaled about could be nothing more than fiction without physical evidence.
Defense that is.
Yeah, exactly. No proof. American doctors had experimented on prisoners by infecting them with malaria, making the accusations no more unethical than what Americans were doing anyway.
I mean, that's true.
He's got us there.
Tuskegee, man. We did some terrible shit. Yeah.
His testimony, compounded with the Camp Detrick scientists' desire to pick Blome's brain, resulted in the doctor's acquittal on the 27th of August in 1947. After he was found not guilty, scientists from Camp Detrick began to interview him. So literally, the minute he was found not guilty, they shipped him off to the camp.
He's good. He's good.
They put him over to the camp. Yeah, come here.
He's hired.
Welcome. There's like streamers. Yeah, welcome, Dr. Blome. Here's your paycheck. It's time to party. It's frustrating reading this shit. As the experiments intensified abroad, the scientists at Camp Detrick renewed their interest in adding Kurt Blome to their ranks, no longer content with just interviewing him. The CIA found him practicing medicine in Dortmund, and in 1951, Blome was offered an accelerated paperclip contract should he agree to spill his secrets, and of course, he accepted.
Dude, just got like legit rewarded for like being evil.
Yeah. Yeah. If you think, via movies and media that all bad guys get their comeuppance. No, that's not how it goes. We might be the bad guys. However, backlash at Dr. Walter Schreiber's arrival in the United States caused problems. Newspaper columnist Drew Pearson published excerpts from Nuremberg testimony that implicated Schreiber in war crimes, specifically the assigning of doctors to carry out experiments on concentration camp inmates, causing a public outcry. Schreiber's American sponsors canceled his paperclip contract, and the doctor retired to Argentina, where a fuck ton of other Nazis ended up running to after the war ended. And
in my headcanon, Magneto killed them all.
And that's how it should have been.
Every last one.
Yeah, my dad went deep on a book about Hitler being down there.
Yeah.
My dad, after he read the book, he was like, he was there. It's a shame. He was there.
The scandal erupted as Blome's application was actually under review, and although Colonel Garrison Cloverdale had approved many applications, the sheer extent of Blome's crimes disqualified him from the entry to the U.S. and recommended the visa be denied. The CIA was fucking furious and appealed with an angry memo in return. The appeal was denied on the grounds that admitting Blome to the U.S. would bring unwanted attention not only Blome, but the other former Nazis who had already been quietly brought to work in American military bases and research laboratories.
You let our war criminal into the country, damn it.
Yeah, exactly. Literally, they were going to be fine with him until somebody else, they just like a spotlight got put on him. Like, what? No, we're not. Go away. No, Blome's not coming over. Don't worry about it. It's fine.
Not him.
Yeah, no. Not this guy. See you, Blome. It was good to talk. Like, that's it. But the CIA was determined to use Blome one way or another, and therefore sent him to Camp King, another CIA black site, as the position at the position of staffed doctor, recently occupied by Schreiber, now open. So he took the place of the person who got kicked out because of his past and his war crimes. And in 1940, and what?
Nice. Cushy,
cushy
little
sweet
position.
Just so you know, CIA was created in 1947. So this was shortly after the CIA was created. Blum was trying to bring brought in.
So right out the gate, CIA was like, we're the worst.
Yes, they were. Fuck them. In 1945, Truman dissolved the Office of Strategic Services, which kind of started this whole thing. And 2 years later, they more or less reformed the CIA. So the CIA was the OSS, and the OSS was the CIA. So
it's just more like a peacetime version.
Yeah, just like they renamed the Chemical Warfare Division to ChemCorp or Chem Corporation or whatever.
It's more fun.
Like they just
rolls off the tongue.
It's way more fun, way more easy to swallow. Swallow the pill, public. We're not doing anything terrible. Don't worry. The CIA's first covert operations were in Europe during the Cold War, where its officers hired Corsican gangsters to break. Did I say that right? Corsican?
Yeah, Corsican's right. Yeah.
Corsican gangsters to break a communist-led strike at the port of Marseille. It ran a campaign to prevent communists from winning a national election in Italy, which succeeded. In 1945, the next trial that would help form MKUltra started, the Minzante Trial. It was the trial of the Roman Catholic prelate of Hungary, Cardinal Joseph Minzante, that propelled the CIA into the research that led to Project MKUltra. Minzante appeared at a show trial and confessed to an extravagant charges of attempting to overthrow the government, directing black market currency schemes, and seeking to steal the royal crown as part of a plot to reestablish the Austro-Hungarian Empire.
Literally another super villain.
Yes.
Little finger.
Yes.
Like just a crazy villain.
He was sentenced to life imprisonment. While leaders of the Western world were outraged at the display, the CIA were more concerned with the way Minzante had behaved during the trial. He appeared disoriented, spoke in a flat monotone, and confessed to crimes he had evidently not committed. Clearly, he had been coerced. To the CIA, it was obvious that the Soviets had developed drugs or mind control techniques that could make people say things they did not believe. And in the spring of 1949, despite the falling favor of the Chemical Corps, Camp Detrick created a secret team known only as the Special Operations Division to research into ways that chemicals could be used as weapons of covert warfare. And in 1950, where we'll be picking up next week, the first MK project was created, known as MK Naomi, rumored to be named for the secretary of its creator.
Acid
and
Man.
That's where we'll pick up next week.
I can't believe they're like, Naomi, I want to let you know, dear, we created a Chemical Warfare Division.
MK Naomi is the name of the next Kojima game. MK Naomi. Like, what? Are you fucking kidding me? MK Naomi?
Not at all.
How is that not from an anime?
Naomi. Dude, sometimes, truth is stranger than fiction, brother.
That's fucking insane. Ridiculous.
I'm so glad I actually got to introduce Jesse as a history nerd to Unit 731. I thought that might be something you knew about.
I wish I never knew about it.
Yeah, now you wish you never knew, but forever ruined. Forever ruined.
Wow.
And that's it for the beginnings of MKUltra, everybody. We'll be coming back next week with some more.
Hey, everyone, COVID vaccine coming soon.
Get
After
ready.
we tell you all the terrible things the government does, we're like, so yeah, you all want this vaccine though, right?
Yeah, and if you head to
but for real,
Patreon,
get the vaccine. Please get the vaccine.
Yes,
for
get
real.
the vaccine. Get the vaccine. Patreon.com/Chilluminati Pod does not have the vaccine, but you can subscribe and support us there. And if you do, you get 15 more minutes of the show right after this. And I swear to God, I'm going to read a listener story, and it's a weird one.
I've got aliens in the docket for my mini-sode topic. So
a person leaves their soul and then sees themselves 3D printed. That's my favorite shit.
I haven't read
that stuff.
Mathis says it's good. He got it from his Instagram as a DM. So take it with a grain of salt, folks.
I'm ready for this.
Patreon.com/Chilluminati Pod.
Thank you guys so much for listening. We'll be back next week with MKUltra Part 2. We love you very much. You can find us over on Twitter at Chilluminati Pod for the podcast. Wherever you're listening, please drop us a review. It helps a huge amount. We're trying to cross over to that 1,500 mark just because it's a nice round number and it does my brain nice tickle chemicals.
Help satisfy Mathis' compulsions.
Yeah,
yep, exactly.
Tickle his brain.
Tickle my brain with that 1,500, everybody. See you next week. Goodbye.
Smooth.
Anyway, me and
and my wife were sitting outside indulging on our porch one night, enjoying ourselves. I needed to go to the bathroom, so I stepped back inside, and after a few moments, I hear my wife go, "Holy shit, get out here." So I quickly dash back outside, and she's looking up at the sky in awe. I look up too, and there's a perfect line of dozen lights traveling across the sky.